My ex-wife believed she could utterly ruin my life, and she succeeded. But you know what? Karma has swung back my way, and a few years later, I'm finally getting my share of sweet revenge. I retaliated against my ex-wife after she devastated my life. When I unexpectedly encountered her at my new workplace, my anger flared, and I harbored a strong desire to exact vengeance right then and there. 7 years hadn't been sufficient time for me to recover from the havoc she had wreaked. I lost everything and had to start from scratch after she turned everyone against me. I even relocated to a different state to escape her. Yet there she was, working at the latest company where I held a senior executive managerial position. My history with Charlene was long and tumultuous, and I would have been content never to cross paths with her again following our divorce. I met Charlene when I was young and running a successful startup business. We married just a year after we began dating because she was pregnant with my child. Our relationship grew strained after the birth of our daughter. Despite the baby's tender age, Charlene spent most of her time at her parents' home. Despite my numerous complaints and efforts to involve her parents, they sided with her and accused me of placing too much pressure on her due to her depression. Over time, our communication deteriorated, and our discussions were limited to matters concerning our child. When our daughter was a few months old, I discovered that she wasn't mine, and Charlene had been having an affair with a colleague for some time. That very night, I expelled her from the house and initiated divorce proceedings a few days later. During that period, I was the sole provider for her since she chose not to return to work after giving birth. Despite this, I didn't cut off her access to financial resources because I recognized that it wasn't the child's fault. Legally, I wasn't even obligated to provide her with any financial support in the divorce. I possessed evidence of her deception over the years, but she countered by falsely accusing me of emotional abuse and controlling behavior. Her parents testified dishonestly, claiming that she had once visited their home with visible bruises. Regrettably, due to her manufactured evidence and false testimony from friends who were present, I had to relinquish half of my business and our house in the divorce proceedings, largely due to societal expectations placed on men. My previously thriving business suffered a significant blow due to the allegations against me. My own family sided with her, influenced by her acting skills, leaving me without family support and facing a failing business. Additionally, I had to make substantial financial payments as part of the settlement. In the local town, I became undesirable for business collaborations or employment, forcing me to relocate while burdened with considerable debt from attempting to salvage my business. Meanwhile, she retained the house and financial assets. For about a year, I worked at a company that paid well, but the majority of my earnings went towards clearing my debts. I refrained from inquiring about her life and instead focused on rebuilding my own. This strategy paid off, as 7 years after our divorce, I had risen to a senior executive position in a highly profitable company. My company had recently acquired another firm, and my role involved overseeing the CEO of the acquired company, facilitating the transition and integration of that company into our brand. On my initial day back at the office, I encountered her. Despite appearing considerably older, she remained the same person. I felt such anger that I contemplated requesting my company to remove her from her position. Over the years, I had become estranged from most of my family because they believed I was an abusive man. Never mind that I never laid a hand on her, and she had manipulated me into marrying her. After our initial encounter, she visited my office, putting on a friendly facade and offering to guide me around as a familiar face. I suspected she was aware of her precarious situation and believed that ingratiating herself with me might help. I informed her that I had already taken a tour and asked her to leave me alone. Despite this, my anger lingered throughout the day, and I contemplated firing her. However, despite having the authority, I couldn't terminate her employment without a valid reason. From that day onward, my primary objective at the office became giving her a hard time. After reviewing her file, I learned that she had been working there for the past 2 years and had been competent at her job. It appeared that the money she had extracted from me had finally run out. I did my utmost to make her professional life unpleasant. Initially, I issued her a handwritten warning for being late to work, even though her boss had recommended a verbal reprimand. She had cited her daughter's illness as the reason, but I was indifferent. Later that day, when she made a minor error in a report I had requested, I forced her to redo it and reprint everything, fully aware that the printer was malfunctioning, which meant she had to toil in a non-air-conditioned room filled with dust for an extended period. Then, as everyone was preparing to leave for the day, I compelled her to remain in our surplus office, assigning her a task that was utterly pointless, simply to waste her time. A few days later, my assistant from the other company joined our team, but there was a shortage of offices. I ensured that Lean relinquished her office and relocated to a small, stuffy room devoid of proper ventilation that nobody else wanted. I was well aware that it was the height of summer, and the sweltering heat was unbearable. When she had to pack her belongings, she appeared infuriated, and I half expected her to confront me physically. I overheard her venting about me to some of her coworkers, which only prompted me to assign her additional tasks that she struggled to manage. She consistently worked through lunch breaks because I incessantly demanded more and more from her. She was also in contention for a promotion, a position coveted by everyone in the office. Recognizing her as the most deserving candidate due to her recent outstanding performance and her boss's commendation, I suggested that someone with more tenure at the company be promoted instead of her. Following the announcement of the promotion recipient, she stormed into my office and vowed to make me pay for my actions. A few days later, my personal history became common knowledge throughout the office after an anonymous email was circulated to everyone. My superiors were already aware of my divorce, and I had no criminal record, so they simply instructed me to stay home for a few days. I enlisted the help of a tech expert to trace the email, and unsurprisingly, it led back to her. I filed a complaint against her for slander, which brought her significant trouble within the company. Our company had a strict rule prohibiting slander and gossip about employees' personal lives. If I had been on the committee, I would have advocated for her termination, but due to my proximity to the case, I had to recuse myself. She had to stay home for several days due to the email she had sent. I also narrowly avoided losing my position within the company as a result. For a few days, I left her in peace while I contemplated a way to encourage her departure from the company and leave me alone. Seeing her face every single morning filled me with loathing, exacerbating my pain. Ironically, she ultimately orchestrated her own departure from the company, sparing me from having to get directly involved. Here's what unfolded. Towards the end of the year, our company held a fundraiser weeks before closing out the fiscal year. I had no involvement in the planning. My role was simply overseeing the proceedings since it coincided with the company's announcement of a name change. We maintained a strict no alcohol or drugs policy, particularly when clients were present. However, as the event got underway, I found myself extinguishing numerous crises, many of which emanated from her department responsible for the presentation. During the meeting, several interns began behaving oddly, displaying signs of intoxication. One intern even dozed off at a table reserved for an important investor. It was evident that something was amiss, prompting me to instruct my assistant to discreetly remove the intern from the view of the event attendees. I could detect the scent of alcohol on some of the interns, and the CEO appeared equally alarmed. I approached Charlene and requested her assistance with the tasks the interns were responsible for during the event. She adamantly declined, asserting that she was not a lowly intern, as I seemed to believe. I urged her to accompany me to my office as her behavior was causing a scene. However, her response was marked by escalating anger, and she insisted that I was not her supervisor. Her words were somewhat slurred, and her eyes appeared glassy, a departure from her usual demeanor. I promptly informed the CEO that I had observed some of the staff either being drugged or consuming alcohol at the event. I left him in charge of managing the event and engaging the guests while I delved into the unfolding situation. We swiftly administered breathalyzer tests to the interns who had initially denied consuming alcohol, and all of them failed the tests. I inquired about the source of the alcohol, assuring them that I only sought information to avoid getting them into trouble. However, they remained unwilling to divulge any details. I reached a decision that, unless they cooperated and disclosed the information, we would likely terminate their contracts. Eventually, one of them confessed to stealing wine from my office. I was furious and prepared to terminate their employment, but not before they revealed something even more intriguing. They disclosed that my ex-wife had instructed them to acquire the wine for sharing before the event. I couldn't comprehend why she would act so recklessly, knowing the company's strict policy regarding staff alcohol consumption. Even I was prohibited from drinking alcohol while at work. This policy had been implemented because some employees drove to and from work events and could face legal repercussions if found drinking. I summoned her to my office and urged her to admit to her actions, emphasizing that there were witnesses to the incident. She acknowledged her mistake but explained that she felt the need to drink due to discovering her boyfriend's infidelity. However, I wasn't naive enough to fall for her manipulations. Every word that escaped her lips registered as a falsehood in my mind. It seemed evident to me that she likely intended for the interns to disrupt the event once they were intoxicated. And who would face the consequences for a problematic event? Well, that would be me. I informed her that her actions had sealed her fate and that I would make it exceedingly challenging for her to maintain her employment with the company. She had already received 2 warnings, and a 3rd infraction would result in her termination. I outlined the humiliation she would endure once everyone discovered her attempted event sabotage, despite her hard work on it. Watching her squirm and scramble for excuses brought me a sense of satisfaction. I instructed her to leave for the remainder of the day, indicating that we would address the matter the following day. She broke into tears in my office, pleading for her job and expressing remorse for stealing the client's wine from Yofas. She claimed ignorance regarding the intern's excessive drinking and vowed to reimburse the expenses if I would just pardon her. I calculated the cost for her, leaving her stunned. She proceeded to beg me to let the matter go, acknowledging that my rigorous stance was influenced by our tumultuous history and expressing a desire to mend our relationship. I reminded her of how her previous unfounded accusations had isolated me, resulting in her obtaining my house, depriving me of my daughter, and taking away shared custody of her with her father. She no longer had the house either, hence her relocation to a different city. Once upon a time, I might have sympathized or even felt sorry for her, considering how chaotic her life had become. However, I had ceased to care. She departed for home, and I resumed managing our fundraiser. By day's end, I had apprised her superiors of her transgressions, and they were incensed, contemplating immediate termination. I, on the contrary, desired to subject her to a protracted and humiliating disciplinary process. I relished the authority to determine the trajectory of her future within the company, just as she had dictated mine all those years ago. The following morning, an email of resignation arrived from her end. Although she wished to resign with immediate effect, I had different intentions in mind. The entire office was now aware of her transgressions, and she needed to address the company. I compelled her to complete a 2-week notice period before her departure. Additionally, the company sent her an invoice for the alcohol pilfered by the intern. I contemplated filing theft charges against her if she failed to remit the owed sum. During her 2-week notice period, I ensured her days were arduous. I did her a favor by assigning her an abundance of work, thus sparing her from facing her displeased colleagues who had diligently organized the event. She endured considerable misery throughout her final 14 days at the office. On the last day, as she packed her belongings, she paid me the outstanding amount for the wine. She expressed the hope that I found satisfaction now that she was unemployed. I conveyed to her that the decision to resign was hers to make. At least this way, she could preserve some of her dignity, which would have been compromised if I had terminated her employment. When she ultimately departed from the company, I felt an immense sense of relief, akin to wanting to throw a celebratory gathering. I found contentment in the fact that she had now experienced a loss similar to what I had endured in the past. Perhaps she could embark on a fresh start at a different company. However, she would be unable to use our company as a reference during her job search. Months later, I had completely forgotten about her when I was en route to a work-related meeting. Spotting her on the streets, amidst the company of jobless and homeless individuals soliciting employment or assistance, I almost failed to recognize her. To be frank, she appeared utterly disheveled, and her appearance was a stark contrast to her previous self. I pondered how she had plummeted to such depths when she once possessed so much. Even when I had lost everything, I had not found myself destitute on the streets. This predicament seemed to be a consequence of her own actions, as life appeared to be exacting retribution for the falsehood she had disseminated about me, which had cost me everything. It appeared to be a tale of karma coming full circle. I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe I went too far in my treatment of my ex-wife, or do you think she deserved everything she got? Share your opinions below as I value your input.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
For several years now, I've been grappling with my existence, finding it increasingly difficult to discern right from wrong. I don't attribute this to anyone but myself. I allowed my wife to pursue her desires without reservation in the pursuit of a happy marriage. Even though I knew it wasn't to my liking, I followed along just to ensure her happiness. I needed an outlet to pour out my feelings without restraint, and who better to confide in than a complete stranger? I find myself confessing that I allowed my wife to engage in relationships with other men just to keep her content. I've been married to Bonnie, a 32-year-old female, for 7 years, and I'm a 36-year-old male. Our connection goes way back, as Bonnie is my best friend's sister, and we were part of the same social circle since our early 20s. While we initially dated other people, we fell in love in our late 20s and eventually tied the knot. Our marriage was beautiful, sharing a common social circle with long-standing friendships. During the initial 3-4 years, our relationship encountered no significant challenges. We experienced minor disagreements, which were typical. But after that, she began complaining about our monotonous life. She consistently voiced concerns about our relationship losing its excitement. It took me a while to discern her desires. I'll explain later. We made every effort to keep our marriage invigorating, going on dates, hiking, vacations, parties, playing games, essentially rekindling the activities from our courtship days. Oddly, she never clearly articulated what she truly wanted from me. Instead, she would complain about boredom. When I inquired about her preferences, she would reply, "Research it. There are many new things people are trying to keep their bedroom life thrilling." So I did my research and came up with various ways to add some spice. We began with role-playing, intimate toys, and eventually ventured into BDSM. Surprisingly, we even enrolled in a crash course for it. Yes, I was just as surprised. I had no idea it existed. There are professional instructors who provide training for that kind of thing. It was enjoyable, and I had no complaints. All our activities remained within the bounds of our marriage, with no third party involved. Our relationship improved, but my issue persisted. Bonnie enjoyed each new experience, but her enthusiasm waned quickly, and she always yearned for something novel. It was akin to an addiction for her. The initial dose, which brought happiness, no longer sufficed with repeated use. The craving for more persisted. After a year of this, I ran out of ideas and nearly gave up, but we continued with the activities I mentioned earlier. Things took a wild turn after our trip to South Asia. We were staying on a public island in South Asia where we stumbled upon numerous massage parlors. Something about these massage centers seemed peculiar. First, they advertised happy end massage and your choice of a private masseur or masseuse. Second, a prominent feature on their advertising board read, "Your identity is confidential." It was baffling. Bonnie became intrigued by the whole concept and decided to inquire further. It involved receiving a massage from someone of the opposite gender with an emphasis on private areas. I rolled my eyes and moved on, but Bonnie remained fixated on the idea. She persisted, portraying it as a part of Asian culture, though trust me, it wasn't. Upon our return, we finally decided to give it a try. I entered the private cabin to find a woman in a bikini awaiting me. As I lay down, she began with a back massage, pressing herself against me, making her intentions clear. She asked if I wanted her to undress, to which I panicked and declined, abruptly ending the session. I had suspicions of it being a scam, or a potentially dangerous situation. I hurriedly got dressed and left the cabin, calling Bonnie, but she didn't answer. I inquired at the reception and learned that she was still inside, enjoying the session. I was filled with anxiety, uncertain about my next steps. I spotted a man who resembled someone from the United States. With hesitation, I approached him and inquired if this was what typically occurred inside, to which he confirmed, mentioning they provided a wide range of services, not limited to just massages. When I say all, I mean a comprehensive array. He reassured me it wasn't a scam, but emphasized that they charged for any additional services. I felt partially relieved that Bonnie hadn't fallen into a scam, though I was concerned about what might be happening inside. After a couple of hours, she emerged with a smile on her face. Her young masseur accompanied her to the front gate, exchanging smiles and conversation. Once we were outside, she asked me about my thoughts on her experience. I questioned, You were aware of what goes on in there, right? She rolled her eyes and replied in the affirmative. Curiously, I asked, "And you enjoyed it?" She grinned and enthusiastically responded, "Yeah, it was enjoyable. The guy was skilled at his work." I pressed further, asking her what she did exactly, to which she casually replied, "Just the usual stuff, a massage and some relaxation techniques." Incredulous, I clarified, "Really?" She nodded, trying to assure me that everything was normal, and that's how we found ourselves exploring new wellness techniques. Upon returning home, she couldn't stop praising the benefits of massage. I admitted that I had no issue with conventional spa and massages, which we frequently enjoyed, but I was still unsure about different styles. She managed to convince me to try a new type of couples massage. Eventually, we arranged for a professional masseur to come to our home, and he performed his duties accordingly. Bonnie used to be incredibly happy and enthusiastic during this entire phase. Our relationship truly shone, and I felt like we were a newlywed couple once more, unable to get enough of each other. This went on for a few months, but as usual, Bonnie's excitement faded sooner than I had expected. Then one day, she came to me and said, "You know, couples who open up their marriage are the ones who stay happy forever because they are connected by love, not any other limitations." She eventually reached the point of suggesting that we should also open up our marriage. Naturally, I was taken aback. She presented me with several research articles supporting her argument. I mentioned that we already had professionals involved in these activities, three-ways, leather, etc. She explained that she no longer enjoyed it with professionals and wanted to try it with ordinary individuals. She showed me many married couples who were into this, like couple swapping and such, and they had long and happy marriages. I remained unconvinced until she proposed trying it with another married couple to see how it would go. She assured me that we could stop if I didn't feel comfortable. I reluctantly agreed to give it a try. I can't say it wasn't enjoyable. I did find it pleasurable. However, it felt like indulging in a prohibited substance. You know the sensation. It brings pleasure and euphoria in the moment, but the next morning, you regret your choice and feel empty. Eventually, we ventured into various activities like swapping and hookups and so on. Each time we would tell ourselves, let's do this just one more time, but it kept continuing for over 2-3 years. Initially, I would become silent after each session, but eventually I stopped dwelling on it. Perhaps everything unfolded so rapidly that I couldn't fully process it and simply went along with the flow. On a side note, yes, our relationship grew stronger. We avoided conflicts, and Bonnie was content. We established some ground rules, such as no emotional infidelity, not engaging in intimate activities with others in our bedroom, maintaining transparency, and agreeing to end any involvement if we developed feelings for someone else, addressing it with each other. About a year ago, I encountered a woman named Ella who seemed to possess the kind of energy I'd been seeking. Before that, let me mention that my history of casual encounters was far less extensive than Bonnie's. It tends to be easier for women to find men in such situations. Bonnie did create a dating profile for me, but my challenge was finding individuals with similar mindsets, as most people on that platform were more interested in actions than connections. Consequently, after a while, I gave up on actively searching. Returning to Ella, I met her at work. She had recently gone through a breakup and was single at the time. She worked as a temporary employee, brought in to assist me on a short-term project lasting a year. We connected through our work, and eventually, I disclosed my marital status to her. She was astonished by how open-minded Bonnie and I were. Ella and I began meeting outside of work hours, and yes, we became physically involved. However, the complication arose when I found myself developing emotional attachments to her. I desired to spend time with her beyond just the bedroom. I ceased communicating with other women, and even when someone showed interest in me, I avoided them. My relationship with Bonnie wasn't going well. Despite sharing a home, we were leading separate lives. While we were there for each other when needed, our love was slowly dwindling. Before I met Ella, there were moments when I contemplated ending the situation. I even discussed with Bonnie that we had experienced enough and should return to a monogamous relationship. However, she wasn't ready to make that change yet. She agreed in principle but insisted that we were still young and unexplored. Then, Ella came into the picture, and I refrained from venting my concerns to Bonnie. After a few months, it became clear to me that my feelings for Ella were deepening, indicating emotional infidelity on my part. So I decided to be honest with Bonnie and disclosed everything to her. She was upset and classified it as a form of cheating, insisting that I should immediately end things with Ella. I hesitated, but she presented me with a choice. It was either Ella or our marriage. I chose to prioritize my marriage and gradually distanced myself from Ella. She understood my withdrawal, and by that time her contract at the office was also coming to an end, leading her to leave. Loneliness consumed me once more, but it wasn't just loneliness. It was coupled with anger and frustration directed towards Bonnie. This was far from the life I had envisioned. About a week ago, while I was idly sitting and Bonnie was in the shower, her phone started vibrating. Out of sheer curiosity, I took a peek, even though we had never felt the need to check each other's phones before. We always had a sense of trust and transparency in our relationship. The messages were from a contact labeled Future. I opened the chat and discovered that she was involved in a relationship with this man. What shocked me the most was the revelation that she was planning to divorce me, and he was doing the same with his wife. It sent shivers down my spine. I searched for other conversations, but there were none. She wasn't communicating or seeing anyone else but this man. To my astonishment, their relationship had been ongoing for over a year. Even when I had confessed to her about Ella, she had professed her love for this man, yet she had never disclosed it to me and instead urged me to end things with Ella. Initially, I wanted to confront her immediately, but by now I had become emotionally numb. I no longer felt anything, so I simply returned the phone to its place and pretended as if nothing had occurred. Bonnie and I have become strangers residing under the same roof. After a week of harboring this knowledge, my anger has faded away. It's transformed into a profound sense of betrayal. I'm grappling with an existential crisis, questioning the path I've taken in life. I'm reluctant to face her. My desire is to simply disappear from this situation. I do have a therapy session scheduled, but it's not until 4 days from now. There are other matters to attend to as well, but first and foremost, I need to release my pent-up emotions, which is why I'm here. I realize that I've invited this misery upon myself, and now I must confront it head-on. Update 1. Thanks a lot for the incredible support. It truly means a great deal to me. I anticipated being labeled as weak, a simp, and various other names. Maybe I embody some of those traits. A stranger's comment can't inflict as much pain as betrayal from someone you love. I've had 2 therapy sessions which helped clear my mind. I essentially had 2 options: either confront her and expose their scheme, or quietly resolve my issues before they strike. I chose the latter. I withdrew my contribution from our shared account. I wanted to change my workplace because it was too close to Bonnie's, and I was determined not to cross paths with her. I discussed this with my manager, and he mentioned a potential opening in the next town. I expressed my willingness to go. He hasn't confirmed it yet, but I'm also exploring job opportunities far from here, possibly in a neighboring town or even abroad. I'll start searching for a new place once the job situation is sorted. I also reached out to Ella, perhaps due to guilt or desperation, but I felt the need to confess the reason for our separation. I asked for a meeting, and she initially declined. However, after I insisted on sharing the whole story, she agreed, and I told her everything. I explained Bonnie's plan to divorce me and my counterplan of ghosting her. Ella expressed sympathy for my situation but preferred to stay out of the mess. I respected her decision and didn't contact her again. I've hired a divorce lawyer to handle the situation. Our marriage was complex, not involving infidelity, as emotional cheating isn't legally recognized. While infidelity isn't a crime in most states, it can impact alimony. A member of our local community advised me that the choice of a skilled attorney could greatly impact the alimony and settlement outcomes. Consequently, I opted to hire one of the top lawyers in our town, despite the higher cost, with the hope that the investment will prove worthwhile. This attorney gave me his assurance that he would work diligently to exempt me from paying alimony, given Bonnie's significant income, if not more than mine. He also suggested the necessity of removing Bonnie as the beneficiary from all legal paperwork and insurance policies, a process which is currently underway. Update 2. As mentioned in my previous post, I had nearly organized everything before serving her with divorce papers. The moment the divorce papers were ready, my desire to burst her bubble disappeared, replaced by a craving for peace. So I quietly moved out while she was at work. I packed my belongings, loaded them onto my truck, and departed. On the dining table, I left the signed divorce papers with my lawyer's contact information and a note that read, "Saved you the trouble of preparing divorce papers for me. Here you go." By the time she returned home and discovered the note, I had already settled into my new apartment in the neighboring town. With my manager's assistance, I secured a transfer to a different office location and found a nearby place to live. I haven't disclosed this location to many people. It's only known to my brother, parents, and Ella. More on that later. Despite Bonnie's attempts to contact me, I had blocked her on all platforms. I could see her calls and voicemails accumulating in the blocked folder, and I knew she understood my message. Bonnie wasn't naive. Eventually, I received a call from her brother, a college friend who had introduced Bonnie to our group. I chose not to respond to him, but he left an angry voicemail insisting that I talk to Bonnie. His words were accusatory, suggesting that I had ghosted his sister for my own desires. He threatened to hunt me down along with my supposed mistress, declaring that I couldn't hide from him. Unbelievable. I checked some of Bonnie's messages and discovered she was accusing me of having an affair with Ella. It felt repulsive. I was trying to protect her reputation, yet she was tarnishing mine. Instead of responding to his calls, I shared screenshots of Bonnie discussing divorce with her affair partner. He replied, "Can we talk? I don't understand what you guys are up to." I declined a phone conversation and suggested meeting in the evening. When he arrived, I explained I didn't want to involve him because she's his sister. I gave him a concise overview of our situation, omitting the extensive details. He was shocked by his sister's actions. He inquired about Ella, as Bonnie had claimed I ghosted her because of Ella. I told him the truth and provided emails and chats where I had ceased all communication with Ella. Following our discussion, he wasn't entirely on my side, but also not resentful. He admitted, "I don't know what to do now. I'm in a dilemma." I assured him he didn't have to take sides. He inquired about the seriousness of the divorce, and I confirmed it. I mentioned that Bonnie was also considering it, so an amicable separation was preferable. That's the extent of the developments so far. Update 3. Following our meeting, Bonnie's brother clarified matters with her parents. They wrongly blamed him for our connection, but he revealed the truth, and Bonnie later confessed. He texted to apologize. Bonnie tried to involve her family to secure a better divorce settlement, but they distanced themselves. Despite demanding a hefty alimony, my lawyer, aware of her income, protected my assets. After extensive negotiations, the divorce was finalized, and I haven't heard from her since. Recently, her brother called. He occasionally checked on me, but we never discussed Bonnie. This time he brought her up. He asked about Ella, and I downplayed my feelings, saying we weren't certain. He shared that Bonnie's condition had worsened, requiring therapy. AP has abandoned her. He realized she's a swinger, jeopardizing her stable marriage for thrills. He broke his promise to Bonnie about divorcing his wife. It seems he escaped a precarious situation. Whether his wife knows remains uncertain, but Bonnie likely reached out. She might have sought revenge against AP for his betrayal, but I haven't inquired about it, and her brother didn't mention it. As for myself, I've settled comfortably in my new town. I've upgraded my car and created a cozy home that suits my taste. In my previous update, I missed sharing details about Ella. We're now together. Following our last meeting where she expressed a desire to stay out of things, I refrained from contacting her. However, she occasionally texted to check on my well-being. Gradually, we began talking regularly, discussing my divorce and more. While we're not officially a couple yet, I find her mature and understanding, qualities I appreciate. Though we haven't confessed our feelings, unofficially, we're already involved, and I believe she shares my sentiments. She subtly expressed her preference for a monogamous relationship, which aligns with my values. I assured her my past actions were driven by my love for Bonnie and saving my marriage. I understand she needs time to trust my words, and I'm willing to take things slow. Tomorrow is Ella's birthday, and she wishes to celebrate with special children at a childcare home. I've made arrangements and plan to surprise her. She has a deep love for children and is involved with NGOs supporting kids with special needs. I'm looking forward to a wonderful time together.